Welcome into another video, and we are now on part 3 of my NFL draft grades with the AFC and NFC North today. Previously, we had the AFC and NFC East and the AFC and NFC South. So if you have yet to check those out, they are in, obviously, along with the rest of my videos. Today, we are going to be kicking it off with the Cleveland Browns, who so far have the worst grade I've given out. And it starts off strong with the Mason Graham selection. Defensive tackle wasn't a glaring need for them, but they went with the best player available approach after a massive haul from Jacksonville. That was a phenomenal trade. I just gave this move a solid A because I think Mason Graham's a solid A player on top of that nice haul that they got from Jacksonville. He's going to add another level to their defensive line. They already got Myles Garrett there. It would have been nice to see Abdul Carter paired with Myles Garrett, but Mason Graham will be a good addition as well. I gave the Carson Schwessinger pick a C minus. That I really didn't like that at all, going him at 33. Better players available at much more valuable positions. JT Tuimoloau, what I thought was going to be a lock of a pick. I thought he fits Jim Schwartz's scheme perfectly. Pairing him up with Myles Garrett would have been really nice. I think just solidifying your defensive line there at 33 would have been a perfect pick. I really don't like the Carson Schwessinger pick whatsoever. Linebacker is not really a need for them. And then moving on to Quinshon Judkins, he was my running back 5. I like Quinshon Judkins. Travion Henderson was the much better back, in my opinion. He was available there. Judkins, though, a really hard interior runner. He's got, the chance to take over that backfield now. So I don't hate the Judkins pick. I just would have loved to see Travion Henderson there. And then it just kind of continues to get bad here. Harold Fannin Jr., I thought is decent value at 67. But I don't understand, picking him there just for, a potential David Njoku departure after this year when you've got players like Kyle Williams, Jalen Noel, who will have much better and much more immediate impact on your offense when you need a receiver. Elijah Moore is now gone. All you really have is Jerry Jeudy there. Kyle Williams and Jalen Noel were my wide receiver 5 and 6, and you took a tight end when you already have Njoku. I don't like that one bit. Then they go Dillon Gabriel at 94, and I'm not a big Dillon Gabriel fan at all. Taking a swing on a quarterback with 6 years of college football experience isn't the worst thing in the world. I didn't really like him at 94. Probably should have just gone Shedeur Sanders with this pick, and everything would have worked out perfectly fine. And then you go Dylan Sampson, who I also really like. I think getting Dylan Sampson at 126 is really good value, but he's also a very interior short yardage back with the lack of outside running strength. And he's very similar style to Junkins. So another pick where I was kind of like, really? You come away with 2 quarterbacks, and then let's finish it off here. Yeah, 2 quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders, I feel like if he was the pick at 94, nobody would be bitching and moaning about this right now. You probably could have gone with a better selection here. I don't know if this was an owner's pick. He made the call, was like, this is great value, because it is phenomenal value. I had a second round grade on Shedeur Sanders, but I thought he should have been a first round pick. So yeah, I like the value, but you already took Dillon Gabriel. You now have 5 quarterbacks in your quarterback room. You came in with 2 running backs, 2 quarterbacks. You had much more needs to fill. I thought it was a pretty bad draft after the Mason Graham selection for the Cleveland Browns. And then moving on to another C-plus team is the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, Shamar Stewart, I understand his unreal size and athleticism is beyond me at that position, but he has yet to produce, any real pass rush production whatsoever. He's going to be a very raw and risky pick, especially if Trey Hendrickson's gone. I don't think relying fully on Shamar Stewart is necessarily the best thing possible for them. I think he's a guy who needs to take some time and learn behind some really good veteran edge rushers before becoming the day one guy. And odds are he's going to be the day one guy once Hendrickson inevitably gets dealt. Demetrius Knight Jr., I thought, was a round 3 guy. Another bad pick in my eyes. You're passing on some really good cornerbacks, some really good offensive linemen, some really good safety still available, much more premium positions, much more valuable needs to them. And you go with a linebacker. Like, I get it, you do need a linebacker, but I just thought that was a reach for him to begin with. And the Bengals need a lot defensively. They need better offensive linemen, and you go with this. I just don't like that. And I don't mind the Dylan Fairchild pick. I thought he was more of a day 3 guy. Wyatt Millum available, much better player in my opinion. Safety is their biggest need. You still had Kevin Winston Jr., Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman, Craig Woodson, those guys, Lathan Ransom, all still available there. So I understand offensive guard is a need for them, but once again, kind of the same thing with the Demetrius Knight pick here. There's just better players available at bigger needs. And then it doesn't stop there. They go Barrett, Carter, another linebacker, 2 linebackers in the top 120 picks. I really don't understand that. Lathan Ransom, once again, still just sitting there for you to select him. Another bad selection, in my opinion. I really don't like the draft approach from the Cincinnati Bengals. Jalen Rivers, good value. OL depth, still not addressing the secondary, which is a massive need. And then Taj Brooks, I like the value there. I just don't understand the Bengals draft process at all whatsoever. Shamar Stewart, yeah, I get that pick, but you go 2 linebackers in the top 120 and a guard. You got to do better than that when you have secondary needs. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team I gave an A-2, kicking it off with the Derek Harmon selection. My defensive tackle number 2 in this class is going to be an immediate plug and perform player for the Steelers. You're going to be able to learn from Cameron Hayward, one of the all-time Steeler greats. So he's going to come in my opinion, have an immediate impact on day one. And then 62 picks later, coming away with Caleb Johnson. I love the value there. Cam Scadaboo was the only remaining running back I had graded ahead of Caleb Johnson that was still available. So can't really complain. Caleb Johnson, still good value at 83. I figured both him and Scadaboo were both going to be late second, early third round picks. So I like the value there for him. And then Jack Sawyer at 123. I really hated the idea of Jack Sawyer being considered a day 1, more day 2 pick. I thought he was a day 3 guy, maybe back end of the 3rd round, but I like the value here as well. It's a position of need, a premium position. I like the value here. He is a national champion. I gave that move an A-. Yahya Black, his size is very much worth the risk here because he is massive. I would have maybe preferred some offensive line depth here. And then you go Will Howard, national champion. At 185, it's not bad. He's a winner. He's got years of experience, chip on his shoulder. Would have preferred Quinn Ewers. Can't complain. So many teams passed on Quinn Ewers for other quarterbacks. So what do I know, I guess. Overall, good draft from the Steelers, A-. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, a team who I gave an A-2. We even have an A+ pick in here. We're going to be starting off with a flat A selection here, though, for Malachi Starks. This is, in my opinion, a fall. Not a massive fall. He didn't go into the 2nd round, but a fall for Malachi Starks, who I thought was probably worthy of a top 15 to 20 pick. And this could probably be what's best for his career. Starks and Hamilton are going to come in and maybe be the best safety duo in the NFL. He was my number 1 safety. I think going to play for Jim Harbaugh, where they have just breeded safeties there, breeded really good defensive players in their secondary. I think it's great for Starks, great for the Ravens. Love this pick. And then a 5 out of 5 selection here for the Ravens, landing Mike Green at 59. He was a top 20 player, arguably the 2nd best edge in this class. The fall is very glaring and worrisome, but on the field, he is an unreal athlete, an unreal player. And at the end of the day, it's really good value for a really, really good football player. And then another pick, Emory Jones, offensive tackle. Really like that selection. Developmental piece. He's got all the traits to be a stud. He was definitely my favorite offensive tackle remaining on the board when they selected him. So I love the pick. 3 straight really good picks. The Teddy Buchanan pick, not a bad pick, but I would have preferred them to go maybe Quincy Riley or Mac McWilliams here. Improve the secondary just a little bit. Get deeper at the secondary. Linebacker at 129, not the biggest fan of it when, in my opinion, better secondary players are available, and they had yet to address a corner yet. And then they had 7 picks in rounds 5 through 7, and I thought they did a good job. I thought Cone and Peebles were really good value. Came in with some developmental offensive line, couple of cornerbacks. LeJontay Wester could be a lot of fun. Overall, really good draft from the Baltimore Ravens. Now moving on to the AFC North, we are going to be kicking it off with my Chicago Bears and the Colston Loveland selection. He was my tight end 1, and this makes sense for head coach Ben Johnson. I saw a lot of Laporta comps over the draft process, so Laporta, a tight end who was relied heavily on in Ben Johnson's system in Detroit. 3 offensive linemen were gone before pick 10. The remaining edge rushers weren't overly elite in my eyes. Michael Williams, nice player. Shamar Turner, I just talked about. So I like the pick. I know some people say it's risky taking a tight end at 10. I like the pick. And then a 5 out of 5 selection with Luther Burden, an A+ pick. He was the wide receiver 1 of this draft class. How he slipped to 39 was beyond me. I thought he was a top 15 player in this class. That's A-plus value. Finishes off Chicago's wide receiver room. It wasn't a massive need for them, but if you get, in my opinion, a top 15 player at pick 39, you're probably automatically going to get an A-plus for me. The Ozzy Trapillo pick, I also really liked. He's got really good size and traits to compete in year one, more than likely going to develop behind Braxton Jones once he's healthy, but he's going to be able to get reps with Braxton Jones' injury in OTAs, maybe even in training camp. So I was a fan of the selection, probably the best tackle remaining at the time. My only thing was when it came to the offensive lineman, I kind of wanted the Bears to target someone who is maybe a little bit more versatile, who can kick inside, because we've got the set 5 right now. But, there's going to be some question marks, at least pertaining to the future. Trapillo, he's too damn big to move inside. And then Shamar Turner at 62, I really like the pick, but I thought edge was much more of a need. I really wanted that selection to be Landon Jackson. Overall, not bad. I know the Bears have said that they thought defensive tackle was a bigger need for them. I wanted it to be Landon Jackson. I think edge is a bigger need for them. But overall, good pick. I like Shamar Turner. I think he's going to, be a really good developmental rotational guy in year one. Then it was maybe the worst pick of the draft in Ruben Hippolyte. He's got ninth athleticism and, he's got pedigree of being a 5-star linebacker. But this is a massive reach. I was just shaking my head when they made this selection. There's a very good chance that this guy could have been available in round 6 or 7, in my opinion, and you took him at 132. I don't like that, but they made up for it with the Zoff Frazier pick. Elite size, athleticism, production for a corner. He's very raw, and he's going to need time to develop coming from UTSA, but I think this is a player who's going to turn the notch up on Tyreek Stevenson, who needs to have a fire lit under his ass. I like this pick a lot. And then around 6 or 7, you're getting a developmental offensive guard. Kyle Monangai, my guy. Nice project pieces. Monangai with the potential to have some valuable year one reps. But, he's got a very, very low ceiling. Good in pass pro, though. Hell of a blocker. Overall, B-plus draft for my Chicago Bears. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, who I gave a flat B2, kicking it off with the Matthew Golden selection in Green Bay. Wide receiver, first-round pick. Shocking. Golden, was my wide receiver 4, and they got him at pretty good fair value at 23. Burden, I thought, was 100% going to be the pick once he started talking about how they're going to select a receiver. I think he should have been the pick. I would have maybe even preferred going Maxwell Hairston here, with cornerback, in my opinion, being one of their bigger needs. Overall, good selection. I did not like the Anthony Benton selection. I thought that was a little high for Anthony Benton. Offensive tackle not being a massive need for Green Bay. He does have good size and some solid traits. More of a developmental pick. I get that. I would have liked to see them maybe address another position there, and I thought it was a reach for Benton. So I wasn't a big fan of that. Wasn't a big fan of the Savion Williams selection either. He has the potential to turn into like an elite gadget player, special teamer. But Caleb Bransaw was available. Josiah Stewart was available. There was much better wide receivers available. I was not a fan of the Savion Williams selection any way, shape, or form. And then the move that I thought was maybe their best pick of the entire draft was Barron Sorrell. Good athlete, solid size, consistent pass rusher, very smart player. I think he's going to be a good year one rotational piece for them. And he has the traits and the smarts to, potentially become a starter in Green Bay, in my opinion. And then they did a solid job in, rounds 5 through 7. I thought Brinson was really good value. Some developmental offensive line, defensive linemen. Overall, a B. It's not, not bad. I'm sure I'm going to be like, oh, look at the Bears fan giving the Packers a B. But, it's not a bad draft. The Savion Williams selection and the Anthony Benton selection really kind of held it down for them, because I love the Sorrell and Golden picks. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, who I gave a B-2, and Vikings fans should be pretty happy with that, because I've been seeing a lot of C-pluses around for their draft grades, and they should also be happy that I'm not giving them that good of a grade, because it seems like every single time that I talk bad about the Minnesota Vikings, everything works out in their favor. So maybe you should be happy that I'm giving them the worst grade in the NFC North. Donovan Jackson, C-plus move for me. I think he's going to be a very solid guard in the NFL. But I think passing on Malachi Starks, Maxwell Hairston, Josh Simmons, who I think is a better, pure offensive lineman to begin with, who has played inside as well. I think those are really big misses for, in my opinion, Donovan Jackson, a second-round pick. And then Ty Felton, he's going to bring some explosiveness to their offense and their wide receiver room, but it wasn't really a need. Jalen Naylor has fared well as a wide receiver 3, and they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I thought there were better wide receivers still available, some good safeties still on the board, bigger needs for them there. Another move that I gave a C+. The Vikings had very limited draft capital to work with. It was more their, day 3 selections that kind of boosted their grade up, because I really like the Tyrion Ingram Dawkins pick. I think he's a freak athlete. He's a little bit more raw. He's going to be a developmental project piece, but I think the value there at 139 is very good. A guy who I thought was going to be an early 4th rounder. And then Kobe King, once again, really good value there. Good sized linebacker, good production. He's got a high floor. Going to be a special teamer, rotational linebacker piece. His athleticism, though, is pretty weak. That's going to kind of limit his ceiling. But overall, I like the pick at 201. And then Gavin Bartholomew, I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you. I had no idea who that guy was. So I just gave it a B- because I kind of would have felt bad if I gave him anything worse, because I had no idea who he was. But it's 202, not the end of the world. I looked up, his measurables, really, kind of a freak athlete. But damn, yeah, I have no idea who he was, so I just gave it a B-, just like I gave the Minnesota Vikings. And our final team of the day, the Detroit Lions, I gave a solid flat B2. No A's across the board in the NFC North. Kicking it off with Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. I gave a solid B+2. The defensive tackle run was definitely hotter than projected, so not a horrible pick, but Williams doesn't offer much in the pass rush game. I thought he was a day 2 pick, an early day 2 pick, but a day 2 pick at that. I would have really liked to see them go Josh Simmons. I have probably talked about Josh Simmons way too much, but I'm in love with Josh Simmons. Spoiler for tomorrow's video, the Chiefs are going to get an A+ for the Josh Simmons pick, because I love him. Would have liked to see them go Josh Simmons. Really good offensive lineman who can be kicked inside, but they kind of make up for it with the Tate Ratledge pick. Really good pick. Day 1 replacement for Kevin Zeitler. A really good value. I love it. I like the Tate Ratledge pick a lot. And then definitely one of the worst picks of the draft, in my opinion, was Isaac Tesla. That blew my mind. I thought it was a massive reach, probably a mid to late day 3 ball player. I mean, yeah, I kind of figured he'd be, because he does have insane athleticism and size. I figured he'd probably be going in like the early 5th to late 5th round, but much better wide receivers on the board still available. A massive reach. Definitely one of the worst picks in the draft, right up there with Ruben Hippolyte from my Chicago Bears. Miles Frazier, though, good pick, solid value, developmental SEC guard. And then in the 6th or 7th round, Hassanian, he's very small, very semi-athletic. He's got Mountain West production. So it's a 6th-round pick. Not the end of the world. I just thought maybe it was a little high for him. Georgia safety, though, always a plus. I always love SEC DBs, especially when they come from Georgia or Alabama. So I like that. Overall, B grade from the Detroit Lions. This one definitely went a longer because I'm talking about my Chicago Bears and teams within my division. So I like to get a little bit more in depth in that, being a Chicago guy. Overall, NFC North, good, solid drafts, nothing special. AFC North, you saw some really good and some really bad. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another video. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.